morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Microsoft Teams Explosion, How to Prevent Data Leaks with Varonis and Softcat. Today we have two great speakers, Trevor Highley, our very own Specialist Sales Manager at Softcat, and Scott Walker, Technical Sales Engineer at Varonis. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone that you can submit questions at any time during the webinar using the Q&A tool you can see on your console, and all being well, we'll take the time to go through and answer these questions at the end of the session. You should also be able to see a helpful resources widget to the right of your screen and our speaker bios to the left for your perusal. You can minimize and reopen and resize these widgets showing on the screen if wanted to. We also wanted to let you know the recording of this webinar will be emailed to you by tomorrow. If you have any questions following the event, please speak to your Softcat account manager or email marketing@softcat.com if you don't already have a direct contact. I will now pass over to Trevor to start the webinar for you. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Trevor Highley. I am responsible for the cyber services and security sales teams at Softcat. Thank you for joining us today. Firstly, just to provide some context as to why Softcat felt it would be good use of time to arrange this webinar with our partner Varonis. So Softcat, historically, for those of you who have not worked with us for a long time, our background is based upon Microsoft. The name Softcat means software catalog in shortened terms. So a great deal of our pedigree has been around Microsoft deployments and licensing, which is why we think our expertise in Microsoft and also security make us particularly relevant as a partner when thinking about securing Microsoft applications. Softcat's matured over the years, as one would expect. We are now a total IT provider. We are not strictly restricted to Microsoft licensing and deployments. Over the last 4 years, we have doubled in size via organic growth, and there are a few reasons for this, but the main three are, firstly, we have a genuine focus on putting the customer first. Customer service is central to our culture. Secondly, we've evolved from being a traditional reseller of licensing, as I mentioned a moment ago, into being a genuine service provider. And thirdly, we have evolved several specialist areas within our business to help customers in the more detailed and complex parts of IT, one of those being security. So security for Softcat is a really significant business within what is a large organisation now. And we provide security services or technologies to approaching 50% of our in excess of 12,000 customers. And that means that we speak to many customers and partners and analysts about the security marketplace and have a strong feel for what customer challenges are being faced, and secondly, what people are thinking about moving forward. Our security business, again, can really be segmented into three components. Firstly, we have a large part of our business is based upon helping customers quickly and smoothly purchase and deploy what they've identified they want to purchase from a vendor and technology perspective. Secondly, we're often approached by customers who are looking for impartial advice on the best way to approach a security conundrum or opportunity, and we'll provide them with impartial advice on the relevant technologies or process changes to achieve that outcome. And then thirdly, as I mentioned a moment ago, our services capability has increased in the recent years. We have a relatively wide range of assessment services that cover technical utilisation, security risk prioritisation, and also commerciality assessments to make sure that our customers are making best use of what they've already purchased and are avoiding duplication where possible. Early lockdown, so 6 months ago now at least, if we look back to what we were hearing from customers and how we were helping customers, we'd segment that into 4 areas. Firstly, we were helping customers secure mobile devices at real speed. Secondly, we were seeing customers ask for assistance to rapidly deploy and configure and secure SaaS applications. Thirdly, virtual private networking, so VPNs became more and more important for customers. We're helping customers with projects of that type under real urgency and pressure. And then the final area was really around securing the cloud, which touches on our conversations today that Scott will lead in a moment. Winding forward 6 months, I think it's fair to say that most of our clients are now at a juncture where devices are secure. VPNs are in place as one would need them to be for what's now mobile access and workforce. And what we're now seeing, again, I'll segment into 4 areas. The 4 things that we are hearing to be most prominent from 2 sources, which are firstly our customer sat surveys, which thousands of customers respond back to. And secondly is from the output of the assessment services that I mentioned a moment ago that Softcat provide to many of our security clients. The 4 areas being highlighted are user awareness, secondly, data leak prevention, thirdly is managed detection response, and then finally is a common theme which is relevant when early lockdown happened, which is around securing cloud applications. Varonis, our partner, who will be covering the detail of today's session, have relevance within DLP, absolutely. For those of you who know them already will know that. But today's session is focused around securing cloud applications and in particular Teams. When we as Softcat thought about how we can help customers understand their technical options in the 4 areas that I mentioned a moment ago, when we thought about security cloud applications, Teams seems to be the application which has surged in wide usage, most significantly since lockdown. And Varonis stood out from our partner ecosystem as being the clear choice. Varonis have a platform which has great breadth and depth, but some of the use cases and capabilities of that platform are particularly relevant when one thinks about how they can now secure Teams. Teams as an application, I'm sure for many of you, has increased workplace and workers' productivity. It's been a really useful tool to ensure that we remain socially connected in these unusual times. And it's probably here to stay with its current usage rather than declining when we get back to whatever normality will be in the medium term. And really customers are now starting to think about how can they secure key applications such as Teams, because it's certainly here to stay and will probably grow. So without further detail, I'd like to pass over to Scott from Varonis. Scott manages the sales engineering function at Varonis. Scott, over to you.
Thank you very much, Trev. I'll give you all a little wave and say hi, and I'm going to turn my webcam off just to maximize bandwidth, just because the sorts of risks that we're seeing presented through the usage, where there's been that rushed adoption of Office 365. At Varonis, we use Teams quite extensively. This presentation itself was actually built on Teams, and we collaborated as a wider SE team on the content. It was absolutely fantastic. It's great for collaboration. And that's what it is at the end of the day. It's a strategic move by Microsoft to try and unify many aspects of Office 365 and Azure so that users can make the most of the platform as a whole. But with that thought of optimizing for collaboration, where ultimately, you're able to access data from any device anywhere in the world, collaborating with anyone inside and outside of the organization, comes a few challenges. And when you're optimizing for collaboration, often security can be the second part that is considered. And that's certainly something we've seen with the fast rollout of Teams. I was speaking to a CISO not too long ago who said that they got this 9-month roadmap of how they were going to roll out Teams. That became a 9-day roadmap when COVID hit. They absolutely need to get that collaboration in place, make sure that their team members could communicate and effectively run things like meetings. But the elephant in the room when it comes to talking about all this collaboration is data protection. And in simple terms, I want to just define this as where we have sensitive data that's exposed to too many people. So with that simple thought, this is where we relate back to risk. So data is open to too many people. It's open to theft, loss, misuse. From a compliance standpoint, if it's open to too many people, then initiatives such as privacy by design as part of things like GDPR and CCPA are much harder to demonstrate as part of your practices. And then security and threat detection, that side of things. If a user goes rogue or an account is brute forced or anything like that, then this is the data that's at risk over and above what they would, that you would expect them to have access to. The questions that we've been asking our customers when we initially speak to them haven't really changed much in a hybrid world. So from that initial point of, is my data at risk? What we're thinking about is, where is the sensitive data that we hold stored? Do we know who has access to that data and what they do with that? So by that, what I mean is, how is the business processing this sensitive data? Is it appropriate and does it protect it? And ultimately, when we find these risks, what can we do to reduce them without causing an impact to productivity as a team? And then we want to think about detecting any abnormalities. Do we know what, particularly now people are working from home, do we know what our remote workers are doing? Another anecdote is, I was speaking to someone who said, previously we had 3 offices and 1,500 employees. Now everyone's working from home. We have 1,500 offices. So there's a lot more that could go wrong without that control of the networks that people hold. And ultimately, just people start to panic in these times and maybe want to collect as much data as they wish, just in case they happen to be moved on. So having a great way to detect breaches is really important, particularly on the data, which is what is the bread and butter of every business. And then, can you be confident that you are compliant? Much like with the concept of just data being at risk, but thinking about the data that's related to particular regulations, and that can be GDPR, PCI, CCPA, and many other regulations that are in place. And just as important is having that ability to respond to things like subject access requests or any legal requirements to respond with information to the public. So keep these questions in mind as you think about the usage of Office 365 and Teams. So what I'm going to do to demonstrate how everything works, and appreciate for some of you this is going to be things that you already know, but just to get everyone on the same playing field, I want to talk about how collaboration works in Office 365. And an important starting point with this is just to understand that Teams itself isn't really a data store. It's actually touching on the various aspects of Office 365 and Microsoft 365, such as emails and calendaring within Exchange, the users and groups from Azure, the personal files that people store in OneDrive, and the collaborative data in SharePoint, but unifying this experience for the users to make it easy for them to make use of the platform that's there. So this is the team that we're going to talk about today. They are working on the compensations project, let's call it, for this particular scenario. We have Amelia, who's the finance head, and under her is James, William, Linda, and Zoe, who we're all part of that finance department. And then also as part of this team, and by team I mean Microsoft team, we have Sandra from HR. She's going to help with some of the benefits negotiations, and Margaret, who's our external legal counsel. So when we need to create our team, obviously this is a long, painful process where we have to raise tickets with IT requesting. No, we don't. The whole point of Teams is that it's a simplified, streamlined process where our end users can make requests for these new teams pretty quickly and easily, certainly by default. I know some people are locking this down, but the idea is if you want to make collaboration at its easiest, the creation of teams should be allowed for the end users. And it is just a couple of simple clicks. And once that's done, they're presented with the nice little intro of welcome to the team, and given a few options here before they start collaborating. And the membership is set up by the manager of the team, or the creator of the team, in this case, Amelia. But she's also done a few extra things here. She's set Zoe as a co-owner so that she's got someone else to help with managing who's a member. And of course, this not only includes our internal users, but we've got Margaret as the second member down there, who's a guest and external user to our organization. So the next part is to begin collaborating. So what we're going to have here is Linda. She's going to create a new channel as part of this called bonuses. And within this channel, she uploads a file, which is the bonuses data for our employees. So there's various interesting bits of data in here, such as the names, their bonus amounts, their bank account details, and all sorts of other things in there that's needed for doing this particular project. And she's going to work on this with Linda herself, and he's going to work with James and William as part of this. So nice and easy. She segregated this out into a particular area, so it doesn't get lost in between all the other parts of the compensations project. We can also share data pretty easily too. So let's say James is working on the bonuses file and decides that he wants to share it with the HR manager, Emma, she's not part of the team itself, but instead is going to get access through a sharing link. And this is super easy. Again, just a couple of clicks. It can either be done in the Teams client or directly in the Excel client from his phone, iPad, all sorts of places. Nice and easy for him to do that, and he can set her rights from either just read only or to give her modify access as well. I'm sure you're all following me so far. This probably isn't all too new. We've also got the chat and meeting functionality within Teams. So as many of you will know, Skype for Business will eventually be going away and be replaced with the Teams client instead. And as part of that, we can have these one-to-one or one-to-many chats with, in this case, an external person. So William's chatting with Margaret. He's been working on something slightly different, but an employee agreement for a new starter. And he's just said, hey, I need you to review this document, and drag and drops a file. And away you go. So that people can communicate outside of a dedicated team within the Teams client. So before we kind of get a little bit more into the detail of some of the questions you need to think about, just quickly recap some of the simple things we've done so far. So we've created a team. We've added a second owner to the team that Amelia created. We've created a new channel. We've added a bit of data, shared a link to that file. We chatted with an external participant and shared a file with her too. So not a huge amount that we've done so far, but still there's a lot of things that we need to think about. So first off, the concept of end users being security group admins, essentially, without them necessarily realizing what that means. So now Zoe and Amelia both are able to manage the access to data. And given that in this context, it's employee bonus data, it's quite sensitive data as well. They can make changes as they wish, potentially exposing data. There's also this concept of the channels maybe not being used in the right way. Now, in this situation that I've created, Linda created a standard channel. There is also private channels where you can reduce the access, but Linda may have even looked at who's a member of the team today and thought, it's fine, everyone in here should be able to see this. But there may be actually people in here that don't need to see it, such as Sandra and Margaret. It could have even been the case that she asked beforehand, who's in this team? Oh, it's just the finance guys. Okay, that's fine. But then later, Sandra and Margaret were added, therefore exposing this data. And one of the parts of the 365 suite that I find quite interesting, and I've had many people a little bit worried about it really, is Delve. So the purpose of Delve is to encourage that collaboration and bring to the surface files which are interesting based on the activity that users are performing. So if I jump into Delve, I might see what one of my coworkers has been working on, but I also have access to. But that also presents an interesting problem, because if you have access to files that you don't necessarily have a need to see, they may get surfaced through Delve. And with the search functionality in there, I could even use it as a way to try and find things that would be interesting to me, particularly if I was an insider and wanted to, find some sensitive data, essentially. So while it's quite a powerful tool, if we end up in a situation where data is overexposed and the risk isn't mitigated, we can end up exposing more data than we wish. And I have heard of people just turning this off because of the fear factor of what this may mean in terms of the risk to their data. And then, it sounds a little silly, but private teams are not really private. For clarity, there's the concept of a private team, which is what we've set up in this case, where the membership is managed. Or we have public teams, which anyone can join, usually used for sort of like social teams, for instance. But when we set up the team, we had our membership. James was still able to share data with someone outside of the team. And really, nobody knows about this exposure except for James and obviously Emma, who received the link. And so when we think about the access that's been provisioned there, Emma's not really seen as a member of the team, but does have access to data because she's given access to a single file directly, but that could have easily been a folder. And then an interesting point is around the chat functionality. I don't know if anyone's thought about this before, but where the file goes when that's dragged and dropped into that chat. Because with Skype, the file will be transferred, often not successfully. It was never the best way of transmitting data, but the file would be transmitted. It would drop in the recipient's My Received files. And then if we don't know where that file's gone, who has access to it, and when the chat ends, what happens to that file, stay tuned. I will give you the answer to these questions very soon. So when we're thinking about sharing, it's not really caring when we think about the security side, because the control that we're used to having, where IT and security professionals would be the ones making the end decisions around who has access to which data sets. That's kind of now given to end users who, in many cases, don't have the security experience, and goes back to one of Trev's points earlier around awareness for users is often a big worry for businesses. And also, it's much harder then to ensure that we're sharing data on a need-to-know basis. And that can cause us a wealth of problems for compliance when we need to demonstrate privacy by design, but even just the exposure of data. And most people think about external exposure, where data is shared outside of the organization, but internal exposure is just as important too. So let's get under the hood. Let's think a bit more about what's actually happening within 365. So when we create a new team, what happens is we end up with a new Office 365 group, and as part of that, we have some subgroups which are used to provide us with the provisioning of those owners and members, essentially. We have a new team site created in SharePoint Online with various local groups that are created on there, which align to the Azure group, such as owners and members and also visitors. And in Exchange, as I mentioned earlier, we've got the mailboxes and calendaring that's stored within there. There's other parts as well, but as a core part, these are the elements of the team. So that team creates a new SharePoint site. Any new standard channels, as with the example of the bonuses channel that was created, a new folder is created, just as a sort of subfolder under the general channel folder as well that's at that root. Sorry, that was a little bit wordy there, but hopefully you followed that. And essentially the files that people then collaborate on end up in those folders as part of the various channels that are created. But as I mentioned before, we also have this concept of private channels. Now, Microsoft's implementation with Teams and SharePoint is to try and simplify the SharePoint side as much as possible. And so for the most part, they want to keep the permissions as flat as possible within a SharePoint site so that we don't have to delve into the background of SharePoint. So to deal with the restricted access of a new private channel, we create a new SharePoint site. That ensures a good level of segregation. Each team can have up to 30 private channels, at the last check that I had. But that then means that we can end up with up to 31 SharePoint sites per team. And with each organization, these teams get created pretty quickly, often not used very long, but it's not uncommon for me to run a risk assessment, even with a relatively small organization of like 200 employees, who say we're just in a pilot phase, where we're not actually using Teams officially yet, having sort of like double or triple the number of team sites. And that's not including the complexity of the additional SharePoint sites created by those private channels. And then the chat that we talked about before, be that one-to-one or one-to-many, the way that the files are managed is that they're uploaded into OneDrive, and then the file is shared from that location. This does solve a good number of problems, which is we now have a single file in that location, rather than having to, if this was email, let's say, and you were sending it to 10 people, this dropping into 10 people's mailbox. Or if you're having a conversation, this being transferred 10 times. It also means when people collaborate on that document, it remains in the same place. So they can open and edit it and see what various people in that chat are doing. The problem is that they're in OneDrive at the end of the day. It's that personal location. So sometimes what we find is pockets of sensitive data that would probably be more appropriate being stored in a team or an on-premise file server share, sitting around there for unknown amounts of time, and potentially going missing when that user leaves and the data may be purged. So what about what's going on? Can IT actually see exactly who has access and so on? It is possible, but there is a little but in this, in the sense that it's quite difficult. So if we think back to Emma, who had her access given through the sharing link, we're not going to see her if we just review the Azure AD groups. She's not going to be in the members or the owners groups, which also means if we consider the access that's seen through the team membership in the Teams client, she's not going to be present there either. We're only going to see who the owners and members are. So if she's not visible in Teams and she's not visible in Azure AD, where can we see her? Well, one way is we can go into the SharePoint backend and manually review the permissions through there. I'm not saying it's the only way, but this is one way that we can do it. So apologies if this is very small, but I will have some little zoom in points, which hopefully will add some clarity. In this case, we've browsed to our employee bonuses file, and we're just going to drill into the pane on the right to see the access. And if you hover over the little name there or click on the manage access part, we can see Emma listed in this list. And we can also see the SharePoint groups listed here too. But the interesting problem now is that we can't see who's a member of those groups. In fact, clicking on the little drop down gives us the options to change the permissions, which you probably don't want to do, otherwise you're going to cause a world of pain for the people trying to use your team. But what about the advanced permissions? If we jump into the extra visibility you can get in the back end of SharePoint, well, we can now drill in a little bit deeper and see the membership of the SharePoint groups. And now what's listed here, the compensation members, is that Azure group that's created. But again, we can't drill into the details of who's a member of that. We also have this little link down here, which gives us the option to manage links. Again, very tiny, but what this brings up is an ability to manage the links, much the same as what we saw on the previous screen on that right-hand pane. So again, it's the same level of detail. So what we've seen so far is that Emma and Chris are only visible after tedious drill downs, and the team members are really only visible if we look in Azure and Teams, but not within SharePoint. Now, the eagle-eyed viewers amongst us will probably be asking, who's Chris? Because you haven't mentioned him before now. Where did he come from? Well, we also have an interesting byproduct of using SharePoint for the data management, and that is the fact that it still is a SharePoint site. And that gives us the control that we would have as a SharePoint site normally too. So in this scenario, someone's decided to jump in and share the site with Chris, which has now exposed all the data that's being stored within the team to Chris. But Chris isn't a member of the team, which means he's not going to be seen because he's been given the permissions directly on SharePoint rather than through the Azure groups. Very interesting problem, and one that's very challenging to see, and not too dissimilar to the problem of doing this even with on-premise file shares, where you can have the ACLs and the folders, but you still need to revert back to looking at Active Directory to understand the membership of the groups. So there's many ways we can actually control the sharing to try and make this easier to manage. We could change them on the site level, the folder level, or even on the file level. And managing the sharing settings within Office 365 can be quite an interesting challenge. And I know that this is something, again, that Softcat have been working quite closely with their customers to get this right for their needs. For those that haven't gone through this, well, I mean, you can see there's a link, which if anyone wants, just ask in the FAQs and we can send that over afterwards. But an hour video just talking about the sharing settings as a little course that we have. But the thing to bear in mind with managing the level of sharing is finding the right balance, because the whole point of using the collaborative tools in Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive is that we want our users to be able to collaborate. And if we restrict this down too much, we can end up in a much worse scenario of people bypassing the functionality that we want them to use. And so we end up with shadow IT. This obviously can be an even bigger challenge if you're not getting the visibility of what people are doing with it, and the activity isn't being audited. So just something to bear in mind. So to think back to the traditional setup, IT used to create the file shares, the security groups were then set up by them and the members would be managed, and the ACLs are then applied on those folders. Not a perfect situation. This is, again, one of those things that we've been helping customers understand for their on-premise environments for years now as with the Varonis platform, and spotting things such as incorrect permissions being applied in the first place. So we end up with global access where domain users has been provisioned on shares and shouldn't have been. Difficult problem to solve once that's been in place, because without just tearing off the Band-Aid and feeling the pain of the help desk calls, you're going to have a hard time revoking that access at a later date. Obviously, we help with managing that. Okay, I don't want to get into the details too much. The point here that I'm trying to make is, for the end users, it's hard for them to violate the least privilege that's been put in place by the IT or security teams that generally know best. Whereas when we think about the Office 365 Teams collaborative model, the sharing and collaboration is managed by the end users, and it can be done at various places. So we're not just left with looking at the root shares of an IT provisioned share to understand the access. We've got to consider all of the different places that additional sharing could be added. And this could be with a number of people. That could be inside the organization or outside. It could be to named recipients, or it could be a generated link which can be accessed by anyone. Quite commonly, they're used in times where you just want to share something with, I might create a presentation that I want to share with a customer after we presented it. I may send that as a public link so they can then forward that on to other people within their organization to access it. But that obviously presents a problem of when that link is accessed, we don't really know who that person is because the auditing doesn't really tell us. They haven't had to authenticate as part of that process. And the sharing is really easy, and it's supposed to be easy. It's built into many of the applications now across the Office suite, as well as obviously the Teams client itself, and even through like the OneDrive local PC application that you can run and sync the data onto your machines directly. So just to summarize a couple of the key points around the permissions visibility of Office 365, well, when it comes to understanding who has access, it can really be a question of it depends who you ask. If you were to ask our two co-owners of the team, they'd be able to look in Teams and tell you who the members are, but they're probably not going to go diving in and find out where all the sharing links exist. And equally, if someone was to jump into the SharePoint Online side, they're not really going to see those team members. The sharing links are really only visible if we start going through some tedious drill downs in SharePoint Online or start to use other parts of the Microsoft 365 suite to understand where they exist. But even still, we're not going to see the site-only access if we're looking in Teams or looking at things like MCAS. And because of the fact that we can do this delegation, the owners can become security managers in a way without realizing, and that means that they can expand the teams independently, which could include external users, and therefore puts us at risk for quite a large amount of data being exposed to external users. So when you're thinking about the controls you have in place for Office 365 and Teams, these are the sorts of questions you want to be asking yourself. Do you have a clear understanding of who has access to which resources? Do you know where your sensitive data sits, where it's concentrated? Where those pockets of data maybe have accumulated in team sites that maybe aren't very clear just by their name alone? Can you prioritize the risk? And if you're unable to do the top two, that's going to be quite a challenge to undertake. Which means if you can't assess your risk, can you really comply with the regulations around things like privacy by design, or limit your attack surface for data protection and threat prevention? And if you don't have a clear understanding of what resources users have, the data you hold, the risks that you have, how are you detecting anomalous behavior on the sensitive data that matters to you? So the scenario we've gone through is relatively simple, quite a small team with a small amount of data. But this scales up pretty quickly, and the collaborative nature of this causes chaos over time. So let me run through a few areas in which Varonis help. It's key to understand that Varonis are a silver partner with Microsoft. We have complementary functionality that provides you with premium capabilities above and beyond what is available in things like E5 and MCAS. We're not trying to replace what you get with Microsoft, but more give you additional protection and visibility over and above what you would get with the toolings that's available. And what we intend to do is give you the visibility to understand what risks you have, classify the data in an accurate and consistent way, understand the activity of your users so we can ultimately alert to abnormalities around the data that matters to you, and remediate any risks. And this starts with the risk visualization. So in SharePoint Online, understanding simple things like how many sites, teams, private channels, how much sensitive data is being stored within there, so that then you can begin to drill down to the next level, understand which sites contain the most amount of sensitive data. Is there sharing links currently being used in these locations? Which sharing links exist? What data is exposed through them? What's contained within those files? All quick and easy from just simple clicks. And let's not forget OneDrive too. equally as important, as we've discussed, because of the nature of the chat functionality that's in there, and also people just dragging and dropping big dumps of data, moving it into OneDrive as a simple way of accessing their data from anywhere that they need to. On the side where we get into the details, anyone familiar with Varonis will recognize this interface. This is where we start to get into the weeds a little bit more. So again, we can see that employee bonuses file and the concentrations of sensitive data. And then if we want to understand who has access to this, we can pull through the users right in the same view. Now, this is zoomed in a little bit to make this a bit easier for you to see, but these are shown side by side. So we can see Chris, our user that was added to the SharePoint site directly. We can see the members of the team, nice and easy, and with the clarity of where they get that access from with the source on the right-hand side. We can see the owners, so we've got that understanding of who are the managers of that team, including the sharing links too. So here's Emma, who was shared this file earlier in our scenario. So thinking about the classification of data, we have hundreds of policies that are available out of the box with the granularity for countries of GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, and so on. But we also give you the ability to quickly and easily create your own classification rules as you need, with various ways of reducing those false positives down, with things like proximity matching, conditional grouping, using positive and negative keywords to make sure what you want to find is found, and done in a way that is incremental and able to scale to your entire organization, both on-prem and in the cloud, with consistency across both. And once you've done that classification, you're happy with the visibility you're getting, we do have that tie-in with functionality within the Microsoft 365 tools too. So MIP, the Microsoft Information Protection, we can tie into that to apply labels back to all that legacy data that's sitting on those on-prem file servers. We can still scan the content of those encrypted files to make sure that your users are applying the appropriate labels to documents. And that can be over-labeling and applying too much protection to files that actually has a detrimental impact on collaboration, or not enough and ultimately not adhering to any data protection policy you have in place, and potentially overexposing that data should it be shared. So when we think about the activity within the finance team, we have various places where changes were made and where that activity will be recorded, such as in Azure when the group memberships are changed, or when the files and sharing links are created and modified is within SharePoint, and when the files are uploaded and permissions are added to those files for the sharing in OneDrive. And we unify all of the activity into a simple interface for you to be able to query and drill down on the data that matters through any forensic investigation or just a what-if question. What's important is that we're doing this not only for the 365 aspect, but also the on-prem data stores, Active Directory. We can even pull in data from your VPNs, proxies, and DNS, and a whole host of locations, so that you can quickly answer any queries you have about the what happened in any scenario. And because of the classification being accurate and tied to what's important to you, not just those things that are important from a compliance standpoint, but the data that's sensitive to you and your business, we can then begin to alert to abnormalities around the data sharing. So if someone shares more sensitive data than they normally would, either externally or publicly, if you have that enabled, right the way down to other activities such as files being deleted in an unusual way that might suggest that someone's about to leave and just wants to get rid of all the data that they believe is theirs, or they start accessing unusual amounts of data that they don't normally access, including spotting activity that maybe looks like malicious ransomware or other tools in that may have found their way into the organization. This extends into Exchange Online as well. So the behavioral analytics that we're doing on the data stores, we're also doing through Exchange, which means we can see when service admin accounts and so on are doing things that they wouldn't normally do with mailboxes, paying close attention to your executives who are well known as targets. And much of the risks that may present through this self-management, we can help with remediating too. So if we spot that users have been given access to certain areas within your SharePoint team sites, or even the on-prem side of things, we provide you with recommendations for change based on their activity. So if they're not using the access that's been given to them, to the data stores, they're recommended for removal, and this can help with reducing that access down to a need-to-know basis. Finally, on subject access request, again, in this hybrid world, we just want to give you a simple way in which you can search across both the on-prem and cloud data stores to answer quickly questions you may have around what data do I hold about specific individuals within the organization across those unstructured data stores, which are often a real struggle for businesses as part of their compliance needs. So just to sum up over a couple of slides here, Varonis is giving you that centralized visibility and control for the 365 environment so that we can then quickly answer questions such as who has access to our critical data. Classification allows us to understand the data that we hold, giving you the visibility of the risks. We have hundreds of threat models that allow for data-centric threat detection on the data that's important to you. We have ways of being able to remediate the risks that we find and commit those changes back. And the comprehensive and scalable audit trail across 365, but also on-prem too, for that complete visibility throughout any attack scenario. Large US airline, unfortunately wouldn't give us the name, did say that they wouldn't even be considering moving to OneDrive if they hadn't even got this visibility in place because of the risks that they perceived. And on that note, I will leave the summary slide there and open it up for Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Scott. We have received a few questions, which we should be able to get through with yourself and Trevor now. If you do have any more questions you haven't asked already, please feel free to put that through and submit it on the Q&A tool that should be on your dashboard to the right. I'll just go straight in with the first question. What do I need to do to run one of the risk assessments with Varonis?
Okay, so first thing is just get in touch with Softcat. They will then help you find out who the most appropriate account team is within Varonis. That way we can ensure that we've got the right resource from our side to help you with that. In terms of the actual technical side, we just need a few virtual machines to be set up by yourself. These are just pretty standard machines that you need. We'll then do the install with you. It takes a couple of hours for us to get that stood up. And then within a couple of days, we should be able to see some of these risk insights for you very quickly. The auditing comes through straight away, and we can begin performing the risk assessment with you. Usually we will run a session about a week out after that's been installed to take you through a walkthrough of the platform so you get a feel of how that works against your use cases. And then we'll put together a risk assessment presentation and report, much like the one that is attached to the webinar on the right-hand side, if I've got the right location there. Perfect,
thank you. Next question. This one says, I'm already a Varonis customer. What do I need to do to add Office 365 for an evaluation?
So that one's nice and simple. So long as you're on a version which is reasonably recent, which I would hope you are, get in touch again with your Softcat team if you don't know who your account team are. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to them directly. The process for adding in Office 365 just involves creating a couple of Azure applications, and then we can add that into the Varonis side. We're talking sort of like 45 minutes to get that onboarded. And then all the classification rules that you already have in place will begin scanning across the 365 estate. So you'll have that consistency across your hybrid environment. And again, we can run the same sort of assessment as we would do as if you were a new customer, taking you through that walkthrough of what the product's like, but also giving you one of those risk assessments if you wish to help with understanding the usage.
Perfect. Thank you, Scott. That is actually all the questions that we have for now. So I'm going to go straight to wrapping up now the webinar. Just wanted to say thanks so much to everyone for joining and staying right to the end. We hope that provided you with a bit of extra insight, and I'm sure you can all agree the speakers have been great today. As we said earlier, if you have any more questions, please do get into contact with your Softcat account manager, or if you don't have anyone to contact directly, please email our marketing@softcat.com email pot, and we can pass on to the relevant person for you. As mentioned, we will be sending out a copy of this tomorrow, so you can watch it back on demand. It will also be hosted on our website by next week. There is also a post-webinar survey on the console where you can let us know how you found the content. We would love to get your feedback. Just want to say thanks again to everyone for joining, and thank you, Trevor and Scott, for speaking on the webinar today. We hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.